Hello, hello, hello. We are back again with another video. Today, as promised, we are talking about Jujutsu Kaisen. So, there's a lot about Jujutsu Kaisen that we actually need to talk about, because Season 2's just very recently come out at time of me recording this. And it might be finished, actually, by the time this video goes up. So for the sake of it all, we're just going to talk in general about Jujutsu Kaisen. I will probably be coming back to the series at some point. So we probably need to go over what Jujutsu Kaisen even is before I jump into what it is I'm talking about. So let's just go with that. Jujutsu Kaisen is literally a Japanese manga series written and illustrated by Geiji Akutami. And literally, the kanji for it literally just means sorcery fight. It's been published in the Shonen Manga magazine since about 2018. And it's collectively in 23 takoban volumes as of July of 2023, so last year. The story itself is pretty bare bones. It follows a high school student, Yuuji Itadori, as he joins the secret organization of Jujutsu sorcerers to eliminate a powerful curse named Ryomen Sukuna. Now, really quickly, Sukuna is interesting is because he is one of the central antagonists of the manga series. He's a cursed spirit born out of all of the negative emotions flowing from humans, and he was once known as the king of curses over 1,000 years ago. So homeboy is ancient, realistically. He's super old. But why am I bringing this up? Well, because Sukuna is a mastermind compared to all of the other antagonists. The reason why is because through the series it is outright said and stated to us, the reader, that the reason why Sukuna straight up left is not because he got defeated by any sorcerer or any of the high predominant clans and families. He left of his own volition is because he realized the sorcerer's power balance with the curses they have to fight. So as long as he was alive and he kept power boosting the curses to be absolutely feral gremlin children, the sorcerers in turn would be just as powerful. So he basically took a 1,000-year hiatus on purpose. Now, the downside is a lot of the curses also took a negative hit on that, but the ones that didn't were more than enough to keep the sorcerers under the impression that they were winning the fight, knowing full well that Sukuna had purposely disemboweled himself and left remnants out in the world to come back. But why are we talking about this? Because technically speaking, curses fall underneath, yokai. Now, I guess I should explain what yokai is. If you've heard yokai and you're an anime watcher, you kind of know what they are, and in the event you don't, I'll just explain it to you. Yokai is literally a kanji that literally means strange apparition, and they're a class of supernatural entities and spirits in Japanese folklore. The word yokai is comprised of two kanji characters, which both mean suspicious and doubtful, so literally strange apparition is just how you read them when you read them together. And while it may be regarded as a loan word from the Chinese term yaogai, the word yokai has taken on multiple different meanings of peculiar in Japanese context. So yokai are also referred to as akayashi, and akayashi are yokai that predominantly live in the water. Think water-based monsters. Whereas Mononoke also applies to them. Now Mononoke are different. Mononoke are vengeful spirits, Onryo. Dead spirits, Shiryo. Live spirits, Ikero, or spirits just in general in Japanese classic literature and folklore, that were said to do things like possess individuals and make them suffer, cause disease, and even cause death. It's also a word sometimes used to refer to just in general things that belong in the supernatural world that just in general cause a headache and mayhem. And also Momono, which are also a form of yokai. And despite them often being translated as such, yokai are not literally demons as far as a Western sensibility is concerned. They're literally, if you talk about yokai in traditional Japanese sense, it's literally spirits and entities that may be viewed as kami, or gods, although this comparison is more often applied to actively antagonistic yokai, and their behavior can range from malevolence to mischievous to downright asshole-ish behavior to human beings. So in this sense, Sukuna as the king of curses straight up is just the king of demons. And the reason why I bring this up is twofold. Is because while yes, the curses took a downgrade when he took his 1,000-year hiatus, with him being back and getting more power while he's literally squatting for free inside Yuuji, it does actually bring up a very interesting question, and the question itself is one that I, with all of my little, anime fans, us Gucci bitches, I brought it up and nobody's able to answer any of this, and because I have a YouTube channel, I've decided to just subject you, the viewers, to this questionnaire of my brain pan. Sukuna is implied to have been a king of curses, but if you read the manga, it is implied that Chozo and his brothers are descendants somehow of Sukuna, and also brothers to Yuuji, which now brings up the question of, Yuuji, are you like a one-for-one descendant for Sukuna? Because you guys look almost exactly the same, marring some physical differences. And the reason why I bring this up is because it is an interesting take on it for two reasons. Is because when a figurine of both Sukuna and Itadori were released, for some reason the original translation of it was immediately taken out and they had to redo it, and it's not the same anymore. But it literally said Ryomen Sukuna and his descendant Yuuji Itadori. Now that's a very clear indicator to me, at the very least. Some shit's wild here, and nobody wants to talk about it. Because this brings up a question, because so much magic bull honky happens in Jujutsu Kaisen. There's literally a girl who can just bonk the shit out of stuff because she carries around a hammer and nails. Reality is nowhere near this show. But the reason why I bring this up is because, is Yuuji actually a direct descendant, whereas Chozo and all his brothers are further descendants? Let me explain that part, I guess. When I mean a direct descendant, I mean, is he actually Ryomen Sukuna's one-for-one child or grandchild, and Chozo and the rest of them are further down the line descendants, great grandchildren? Because if we follow this logistically, of if Yuuji was born somehow directly from, Ryomen Sukuna, even though he's always been portrayed as a hardcore bachelor in the manga and anime series, this brings up an interesting question of why Yuichi's grandfather just straight up didn't want him talking about his mother. Something happened, right? Is because it was implied from fucking Ghetto of all people that Yuuji was born on purpose for this one specific role. He had a hand in somehow doing this, which is wild to think about, because this now brings into question, Sukuna, did you literally, girl bossed your way into having all of this planned out 1,000 years in advance? If so, how? And the follow-up question to if so, how, it would be, why? What do you get out of it? Because at some point, you have to, realistically, we have to ask the question, my good sir, what is the end game here? Because even if you somehow, magically, were able to wipe out all of the sorcerers that you have to fight, that's cool. Except no, it isn't, because this brings up a brand new question and nobody wants to ask it, but I will. If you wipe all of them out and you're just stuck with regular people, I'm pretty sure while regular people can't outright see 99% of the curses, they would pretty quickly get the memo of, something's not right, and take offense to that. So this does call hardcore into question, sir, what is your game plan? And we actually get told what the game plan is. If you read the manga, it basically, at one point during one of the arcs, I don't remember which one, so don't quote me on this, but Yuuji asks Sukuna, because they collect more of his fingers at this point, what is your end goal here? And Sukuna just outright tells him, chaos. To which, you know what? That's cool, as far as the character motivation goes, just outright telling him what's happening. But Yuuji does question, at what point does your chaos get you anything? And Sukuna does remark to him, it really doesn't matter what it is you think that you have going on, because that is not at all what is happening. Sukuna does have a game plan, and he does not owe Yuuji an explanation. By design, since Yuuji is our stand-in as the audience, that means we also don't really get an explanation for his game plan at the end of everything, is because we're not privy to all of it. We really don't need to know the answer, because he's the main antagonist, right? He is, in fact, the final boss that we will have to face at the end. It's just a matter of getting there, realistically. Another thing that we will also have to consider is the fact that while Gojo, yes, in this scenario is the strongest out of all of the sorcerers, with the knowledge that we have of that, Sukuna planned this out is that, yes, the curses and the sorcerers are linked as far as the power level goes, so if the curse power level goes down, the sorcerers also get weaker. This does now imply that while Gojo is, quote, the strongest, which we see several times throughout the series, he is very strong. This does imply that whatever his current form is apparently as weak as Sukuna when we see him fighting in the first episode against Sukuna on the rooftop. Which now begs the question, if Sukuna is at full power, is Gojo actually going to be in trouble? Which, that's speculation and everything, and I'm not going to go into it because we're not that kind of a channel. But it does call into question Sukuna's Grandmaster plan. Because now we have to ask ourselves, if Yuuji, based off of a faux pas of one, figurine collector who put them up, if Yuuji is actually like a one-for-one descendant of Sukuna, and is actually like a biological grandchild or just child, who took Yuuji from the past 1,000 years ago, dropped him off on what we now know as his grandfather's doorstep, and how did they even come to this plan? Because now we have to be under the impression that somebody in this universe has time powers. And that is a really weird thing to say, is because we've seen people have temporal displacement powers, which is like the guy that can clap your hands, right, and just switch where he's at. Literal physical displacement powers. But temporal displacement implies that you have the ability to stop time and manipulate it to any way you want. We've never seen anybody with that kind of a power. We've seen a lot of curses have all kinds of wild powers, but we've never not once seen people have it. So again, this is like a philosophy kind of a question of how would this have even happened? At what point would this have become a reality? And then I remembered something that's even more prevalent. That is not at all the point of this story, and it kind of doesn't matter. But at the same time, it is kind of important, is because if Sukuna is unaware that Yuuji is a direct descendant, just like Chozo and the brothers are, because they are his biological brothers, this then calls into question, either Sukuna knows for a fact that Yuuji is his descendant and he's just excited, like, oh boy, I didn't think I'd get this far, or is he aware of this and also still doesn't care? Because by the philosophy and by the nature of yokai view children the same way animals view their children. It is a continuation of a bloodline, but they don't have too much outrageous love for them. It's a means to an end, and that is about it. Whereas humans absolutely adore and covet our children, at least some of us do, right? Demons and yokai, according to Japanese philosophy, really wouldn't. Except really high-ranking demons, which Sukuna technically would count as, because that's what curses are. At most, they're mononoke. They're vengeful spirits. Which when I talked about this to somebody, they told me, no, that doesn't sound right, to which I then remarked on them, yeah, but also we don't really know what curses are supposed to be like a one-for-one in this universe. Because in the Western philosophy, demons are just assholes. Just straight up. They hate people, and they want to eat them and ruin their lives. In Japanese mythology and folklore, that's not necessarily the case. Most yokai, most spirits, most mononoke, or aioke, anything you want to say, fall on a spectrum, to where they're outright either malicious or they're benevolent, depending on how people straight up interpret them, depending on what region they're from, depending on what kind of work they do. That's why when I was talking about the Meiru-chan, I know what I said, Miyuki-chan, right? Where she can see ghosts and spirits, the temple she goes to is old as sin, but it's still kept more or less intact, because people in that region kind of avoid it, but still more or less keep it at least clean. Not up to date, but at least clean. But you could tell that people don't pray there anymore, because the yokai that temple belongs to was just straight up evil. So they don't even talk about it anymore. A tradition passed down most likely from one generation to the next. So then this brings up the question, why wouldn't Sukuna also follow into this trend of, wouldn't you have a temple or something? Because literally your superpower in this is called Malevolent Shrine. And that is a thing, and there's actually plenty of actually old-ass shrines that are just straight up told to tourists, you shouldn't go here because it's evil. But at the same time, evil is subjective. Case in point, the goat bridge that everybody is telling people don't do that because the monster is there and blah blah blah. I guess so? Maybe? Realistically, a lot of hotspots in American society that people are like, oh, it's super haunted. At one point it might have been, but because it's been such a hot tourist section for people to just gawk at and everything, the spiritual energy might have dissipated because people are just there for laughs and giggles at that point. Because I love telling people this, not everybody actually has a spiritual, denominator. Well, what do you mean? Well, thanks for asking. When I'm talking about spiritual denomination, I don't mean like you have faith or anything. I literally mean some people just are completely blind to the spirits and supernatural around them. Like, it could be happening right in front of their faces and they straight up cannot see it. It doesn't mean that they are actively choosing not to, it's just they literally don't have the ability to sense it. Whereas other people are super hypersensitive to it and they can see things they can't even explain to other people because then they sound like they're crazy. Right? Spiritual denomination. Like, how sensitive to this are you? Which brings up the question, are the sorcerers actually that sensitive that they can just full on see these spooky things all the time? Or is there a spectrum for them? Like, they slowly go from, not being able to really see them as children to suddenly just being able to be like, ooh, okay, that's ugly, that's infection. Because it's implied that, yeah, you kind of have to learn. Like, you can be born into a family, but you gotta learn how to control the power. Which I guess is a good, segue for this. Yuuji has zero, actually, ability. He didn't come from a sorcerer family, he came from a common family. The commoners Pokemon. But he's able to straight up just beat Sukuna back with a will and a wink because he's just like, nah fam, we don't do that here. And Sukuna is pretty powerless against him. Now, there are several times in the series where Yuuji actually has to take a break because that much spiritual energy must be exhausting. And Sukuna, being the asshole he is, tries to capitalize on it a lot. He straight up rips out his heart in one scene just to be a dick. But again, that's an entirely different kind of a modus operandi. Because Sukuna is supposed to be the main antagonist through all of this, so we're not really supposed to sympathize with him. Until you read the manga, and then you really do kind of start to sympathize with him, is because, as far as he recalls it, right, because he's the only person that was alive 1,000 years ago, a lot of the curses were more than happy to fuck off and not bother people, and the sorcerers, for reasons just unknown, let's just say being people, took a lot of offense to that, so they straight up started shit on purpose with them when they weren't really doing anything. Sukuna, being the king of curses, is the one that had to be the one that, actually had to do something about it. So he did, and that's what labeled him as a crazy madman. Now, there's plenty of fan fiction that, deconstructs this and all of this jazz, and we're not going to talk about that because we will literally be here all day, and I'm going to try and cap this video out as soon as possible, and we're already at, the 19-minute marker, so we've been talking about this for a bit. But I do promise that this does have an end goal in mind. If Sukuna is the king of curses, and his memory is pretty much intact because he's been sleeping for the 1,000 years, so he has most of them intact, then this means he's the king of curses. He was an asshole to all of the sorcerers from 1,000 years ago. He had this grandmaster plan to completely nuke them off the face of the ground because he just didn't like how they were doing things, and the sorcerer started all of this war bullhonky that's still going on today. Then this does bring into question, are the bad guys right in this series? Which is a wild statement, but it is a true statement, because we do have to think about that. Are they right? Or are they just, misguided? I guess the answer to that is really complex on a way that's not normally complex. Because spirits in general fall into, this weird, funky gray area. And what I mean by that is, a lot of people assume, right, spooky ghost story, and also malicious spirit, it's a Venn diagram. Not realizing it's just one big circle, my guys. If it's a vengeful spirit, it's vengeful for a reason. Something pissed it off, and you, unfortunately, are just in the way of its immediate, it's not happy about it. But again, that's completely in the realm of, me reaching. And I can admit that I'm reaching for it. But this also does bring up another question of, if that's the case, and these things are not purposely trying to be dicks on purpose, and this has just been a war that's been going on for forever, because a bunch of other people from old-timey hell just were not able to stay in their lane, is Sukuna right or is he wrong? I guess the answer to that is it doesn't really matter, is because he has been killing people in upwards of the thousands for a long time because of what he might be perceiving as a slight against his people that could have been laid to rest 1,000 years ago, but he didn't go down that route. And before you say, no, he didn't, the Shibuya arc, that's what I said. I know what I said. If you know what I know, if you know, you know. If you don't, he literally, like, nukes an entire part of the city because he's free. There's entire anime videos about it. But it does, again, like, this is an interesting waypoint into this, like, Jujutsu Kaisen series. Because while the anime is only getting to season 2, the manga is significantly further along. And it tackles so many more subjects and it's just so deep. And I can't wait for, like, the anime to catch up with it because there's so many cool fight scenes. But again, that's more of a personal thing for me. Do I have anything else I have to add? No. Okay, bye!